The military battles against an Esper named Hobu, who wrecks them completely, but surprisingly turns himself in so that he can be taken to a prison made specifically for Espers. He immediately insults the prison wardens and they try to subdue him with ECPs, but he still manages to use his powers. Here, he meets Andy Hinomiya. He's supposed to be an Esper but doesn't seem to know his powers yet. The both of them are taken to confinement where they get to know each other and become acquaintances. Andy promises to join Hyobu's team if he promises to break him out of jail. Later, the guards try to poison Hyobu's food, but he spots this and offers his plate to Andy instead. The drugs kick in and Andy loses control of his body during a prison fight. He is taken to the hospital but Hobu shows up and frees Andy, after which he reveals that it was his plan to come here all along. They make their way to free Hyobu's friend Yugiri, who is a child Esper. However, the warden arrives with an ESP hybrid monster and sets it loose. Hobu fights it but doesn't cause much damage as the monster is too strong. Andy manages to distract the monster for a bit, but Hobu gets angry when he sees how Yugiri has been treated as a prisoner. He deactivates his limiter and destroys the monster using his true powers. An Esper hamster named Momotaro escapes from the debris and joins Yugiri. Hobu destroys the facility and takes his fellow Espers to the Pandra ship Catastrophe. Andy makes good on his promise and joins Hobu, but he is revealed to be a spy working for a US agent named Adam. Andy makes his acquaintance with the other core members of Pandra, Momiji, Yo, and Maggie. A week has passed since he's joined and the team learns that Andy has the power to negate Espers, and they need to maintain a safe distance from him to avoid headaches and illness. Maggie doesn't trust Andy's intentions, but Hobu asks him to be more considerate. Now, the team heads out to handle a weapons trading mission with Mafia boss Carlos. They are betrayed and attacked by Carlos's men, but they handle the situation with ease. Despite this, Hobu decides to meet Carlos later that night and tasks Andy with shooting the Mafia Lord. During his conversation with Carlos, we learn that Hobu was born in the 30s and uses his powers to keep himself young. Andy is unable to pull the trigger, but Hobu had anticipated this and sent his clones to the meeting instead. He kills Carlos but notices that he is just a robot and the real Carlos is actually a high-level Esper who attacks them from a distance. However, he is destroyed instantly when Hobu awakens his true powers again. Now, Hobu gives Andy a limiter just like the one he has so that he can be susceptible to the other's powers. He also reveals he had died once but was reborn to fulfill his mission. Later, Maggie asks Yugiri to read Andy's mind now that he can't negate her anymore, but she refuses as she only answers to Hobu. Now, Princess Sophie Grace holds a party for Esper organizations, and Agent Minamoto and Sakaki are also in attendance. They notice Pandra there, and Sakaki confronts Hobu for a bit before Minamoto tells him to stop. Pandra leaves a message on the wall stating they've kidnapped Sophie, and this creates panic everywhere. Sakaki reveals he had snatched a USB drive from Hobu during their confrontation, but this is all part of Hyobu's plan. Sophie wakes up and meets the squad. She learns that assassins are after her life and Yugiri had requested the team to protect her. Sophie takes a liking to Yugiri and chats with her, after which she decides to take her out for a walk. Hobu proceeds to use mass hypnosis to make every woman in the city look like Sophie, and Pandra uses this chance to take down the assassins while Andy guards the real Sophie and Yugiri. During the cleanup, Hobu learns that this assassination was planned online, but the mastermind cannot be identified. Sakaki manages to access the contents of the USB drive, but the general stops him from viewing crucial information. Later, we learn that Sophie had spent time with Yugiri at an orphanage before, and that is why they have a connection. But then, we learned that Sophie's own staff members wanted to kill her for allotting national funds to the welfare of Espers. He shoots at her, but Andy takes a hit to protect her. Yugiri gets angry and we see a glimpse of her powers. But then, Hobu arrives and takes down the villain before handing him over to Minamoto. Hobu says that this was exactly what he had planned, and then leaves with his Espers. Minamoto is shown to be working for an organization named Babel. His team surrounds the Catastrophe ship, and they send a group of young Espers called the Children to hack the ship's main computer. The leader of the Children, Kaoru, takes on Hobu, and they engage in a fierce battle, while the other two children, Aoi and Shiho, take Andy as their hostage and use him to defeat the other Espers before gaining access to the computer. However, Hobu takes on the children, while Andy confronts an Esper named Fujiko by activating his true power, which is to disable an Esper's abilities temporarily by touching them. Once he defeats Fujiko, he regains control of the ship, and the other Espers steer it away from Babel. The children unite to attack Catastrophe using a triple boost enhancement, but Hobu defeats all three of them without much effort after accessing his true powers. The girls cry over their loss, but Minamoto consoles them and also discusses a worrying precognition about Hobu with Fujiko. Hobu sends the ship for repairs and infiltrates a Babel medical facility to conduct some tests on his health. Meanwhile, the other Pandra members explore the city, and then Andy is tasked with looking after Yugiri, who wants to experience a fun day. He takes her out to the amusement park and they have a good time. However, Minamoto and Fujiko confront Andy and ask him to work with them as they already know that he's a spy. They tell him about how Hobu has murdered lots of people and wants to end all of humanity. However, Andy asks for some time to consider this request. Meanwhile, Yugiri helps a child find his parents, but she is discriminated once they find out that she's an Esper. She feels threatened around all the humans and unleashes her powers, thus creating a deadly hypnotic trance. Andy rushes to her in time to calm her down, and then the other Espers arrive to take them away. Later, Momiji tells Andy about how Hobu saved every Pandra member's life, and also mentions that he wants a better future for all the child Espers living in Catastrophe. This creates conflict for Andy, who is now confused regarding Hyobu's true intentions. Everyone celebrates Hyobu's birthday afterwards, but he doesn't share the results of his health reports, as he doesn't have much time left to live. Now, the team plans to steal a new ECM device, while Andy is ordered by Adam to complete his mission, which is to obtain Catastrophe's defense system, Ihachigo. Yugiri becomes comfortable with Andy and asks him to read her a bedtime story. After she falls asleep, Andy sneaks into the library and sees Hobu talking to the consciousness of his wartime colleague, Utsumi. Andy tries to run away before he's caught, but he drops his limiter and Hobu finds it. He confronts Andy later to remind him not to mess up the current situation. However, Andy tips Babel about this, and they set a trap for Pandra, but decide not to deploy the children to avoid any collateral damage. The Pandra members face off against Minamoto and his team, while Hobu goes back to Catastrophe to protect Ihachigo. Kaoru interrupts him on his way, and he easily defeats her even despite his health affecting him more often now. Meanwhile, Andy makes his way into the Ihachigo room and starts to disable it, but Hobu arrives and reveals he knew he was a spy right from the start. A flashback shows us Hobu as a child. He moves in with Fujiko and her dad after his own father dies. We also see that Hobu was beaten up by his father because he didn't want him to use his powers. Later, he meets Captain Saotome Eiji, who wants to include him and Fujiko in the Army Special ESP Force. Despite Fujiko's initial resistance, both the kids join the unit and begin their training. After their introduction into the unit, Hobu is reprimanded by a police officer for wearing fashionable clothes during the time of war. However, Fujiko confronts him and ends up kicking him down along with a naval officer. This incident lands the ESP unit under house arrest, and the officials consider disbanding the team. However, one of the soldiers spies on the meeting using his powers and learns that Eiji has proposed a bet wherein the ESP unit will be forgiven for the incident if they are able to defeat the Army's latest Zero fighter jet. Hobu is chosen for this task and he is made to train rigorously for the battle. Fujiko shares an emotional moment with him the night before and wishes him luck for the fight. The exercise begins and Hobu gets involved in a game of cat and mouse against the Zero fighter jet. In between the fight, Hobu remembers how his father discouraged him from being an Esper because his mother had lost her life due to her own abilities. However, Hobu also remembers an emotional conversation with Eiji and it motivates him to enhance his powers. A tense sequence follows and Hobu eventually wins. Suddenly, an enemy submarine appears and the ESP unit gets to work. They notice a group of ESP dolphins and witness one of them getting killed by the submarine's torpedo. Hobu saves the other two by blocking the remaining torpedoes and goes to hug Eiji as the team celebrates. However, the dolphins warn the unit about an ominous future lying ahead. After the bombing of Hiroshima, most of the army's Espers are killed and Eiji decides to surrender. Hobu offers to fight for him, but then Eiji reveals that he used the brain of the ESP dolphin named Ihachigo to see the future. He claims that Hobu will destroy the world and calls him a monster, after which he shoots him. However, Hobu comes back to life and seemingly kills Eiji in a fit of rage, after which he vows to avenge his fallen comrades. Back to the present day, Andy faces off against Hobu, and he manages to deactivate Ikahigo's cloaking powers to expose Catastrophe's location. The ship is attacked by tons of unmanned drones and it angers Hobu, so he goes out and starts to destroy them all. This was just a decoy though, and Adam's soldiers infiltrate the ship with the ESPs to kidnap the Espers inside. Minamoto learns of the attack on Catastrophe and reveals that Babel wanted to capture Pandra so that they could avoid this very situation. He allows Maggie and the others to go and help their people. Meanwhile, Adam finds Yugiri and uses ECMs to knock her out and kidnap her. Andy disagrees with the way Adam is treating her and rebels, but is shot down immediately. Hobu witnesses the destruction of his ship and loses his mind. He switches off his limiter and destroys every drone in sight. However, one final round of ammunition hits the ship and Hobu's heart runs out of steam. Maggie and the others manage to evacuate everyone else from the ship, and Andy wakes up to see that his limiter had stopped the bullet from killing him. Andy dives into the water to save Hobu, and then they meet Fujiko, who takes them to the Tsubomi estate to heal Hobu. While Fujiko tries to connect with Hobu, the children take the help of Dr. Oboro to remove the army chip inside Andy, thus keeping his location a secret. The children find out Hobu's location through Oboro and knock her out so that they and Andy can go talk to him. Meanwhile, Maggie and the other Espers learn that Yugiri is being held inside a US airbase. Now Andy meets Hobu, who wants to learn more about his boss. That's when he realizes that Eiji is somehow still alive. Sakaki reveals that Hobu is going to die soon and uses Kaoru's blood to keep him stable for now. Despite not having fully recovered, Hobu escapes the facility even after Kaoru tries her best to stop him. Meanwhile, Eiji plots to use Yugiri in order to change the precognition he had seen, where Kaoru becomes the Queen of Destruction and brings the whole world to ruins. Now Andy and Hobu team up and move quickly so that they can save Yugiri. They find Adam and force him to lead them to Eiji, but he secretly alerts his team about this so that they can prepare for their arrival. As they enter the facility, Adam also tells Andy that Yugiri was created in a lab using a female Esper, mostly assumed to be Hobu's mother. Unfortunately, Yugiri has been taken away from the location by now, and Eiji speaks to Hobu via the radio to tell him that he will save the world by killing both him and Kaoru. An army of drones attack them and Hobu gets injured, so Andy has to do most of the fighting. A lengthy encounter follows, but there are too many machines for our heroes to handle. Luckily, Maggie and the other Espers arrive and help them out. The team realizes that Eiji is going to use Yugiri to kill Norman Green, the new mayor who supports Espers. As they reach New York, Yugiri takes down each of the Espers as she is under some kind of trance. Andy follows Yugiri and manages to stop her from killing Norman using Minamoto's and Sakaki's help. But then, Yugiri unleashes a hypnotic attack that covers the city and starts a riot. Hobu goes to handle her, but even he has to face a hypnotic attack where he is made to confront the demons of his past. Despite knowing his body's limitations, Hobu unleashes his powers and negates the hypnosis. After that, he uses the memory of their first meeting to snap Yugiri out of her trance. However, Hobu's limiter breaks and he loses control of his powers. He asks Andy to run away with Yugiri before he explodes, but neither of them listen to him. Andy risks everything and uses up all his negating powers to suppress Hobu, thus saving his life. Now that Eiji's entire operation is sabotaged, he asks Hobu to kill him, but he simply erases his memories instead. Andy decides to go find his own path, and Hobu makes him an honorary member of Pandra before he leaves. Now, the members of Pandra set out on their new journey. And that's the end of the show. Like, share, and subscribe to keep up with all my latest recaps. I'll see you soon!